Stiles playing Jun Monsters, and Collin's deck list looks very, very reminiscent to what Chris Van Meter played like last weekend in Indianapolis.
Yeah, there is. I'm trying to even see if there's any substantial changes to the list. Not really. This is pretty close to the same list. And this is where Jim's going to get paid off for the modifications he's made to his list. The Jun Monsters list is now main decking Abrupt Decay. Collin has 2 in his list. Of course, there's the Golgari Charms in the sideboard. All this is an effort to fight Detention Sphere, among other cards. And Jim's list is ignoring all of that and going straight to Planar Cleansing.
Sylvan Carriage for turn 2 here for Stiles, so he is accelerating Davis with just a Mutavault with the ability to cast a Syncopate here against Stiles. Jim has multiple copies of Syncopate in his hand, and he's going to cast some of them here, I imagine, on this Domri. Get that thing out of here. Let's see if Stiles has a land to play. And the answer is yikes. He does. Yikes. Could have played that beforehand, but he didn't. You see Davis is going to pick up a copy of Dissolve. He's going to play an island, pass the turn back. He could resolve a Divination right now, but it's probably better to hold up that counter wall so nothing bad happens to him.
And I think Collin immediately, you can tell knows the error of his ways there.
I'm going to play my lands now, that's for sure. 5 mana, this another Syncopate? Now the question is, do you Syncopate or Dissolve? I imagine you probably Syncopate, right?
Yeah, the Dissolve has so much value just long term. There's still threatening cards in Collin's deck that aren't that expensive, especially Domri. So just take your time, leave the Dissolve leave the Dissolve up as long as you possibly can.
Davis with a Temple of Enlightenment here. His counterspells has gotten a lot of value taking care of a Domri and a Stormbreath Dragon. He's going to play a Temple of Enlightenment. Take a look at his Dissolve. Already has a Dissolve in his hand. Decisions here for Jim, because if he does even cast the Dissolve the next turn, he's going to look at that Dissolve again.
And I think another concern here is that Jim wants to get to the spot where he has 6 mana so he can Divination with Dissolve back up. So there's an argument for putting it in the bottom, but Dissolve is so good here with Collin running out of resources that Jim's just going to leave it in his hand.
He says, I'm going to leave it. And that's exactly what he's going to do. There's a Temple of Malice. Stiles going to put the top card to the bottom. Let's see what he's got to play this turn. 2 mana. That's a Sylvan Caryatid. Davis doesn't care much about that. He's just going to pass the turn back here. So Jim's got to be happy with how things are going, because even though he didn't get to use Dissolve that turn, that's fine. I got this Dissolve for the next turn.
And you can see he's in absolutely no rush here to do anything.
See if he has any interest in countering this, maybe scrying a land to the top of his deck. Courser can provide a little bit of advantage. You have to imagine that last card in Stiles' hand doesn't really do very much.
Yeah.
As he would have cast it the last turn.
A land or a removal spell, most likely.
Dreadbore, Abrupt Decay, maybe even the Mysium Mortars.
And this is one of those weird spots where Jim's playing this game trying to make sure that something doesn't resolve. There's going to be maybe a 1-turn window where something can happen to him. So in theory, he could let that Corsair Crewfix resolve and Supreme Verdict, but then his shields are down, and if something like Domri or Xenagos slips through, things could be problematic. So Jim's just going to play a really slow game here, make sure that nothing slips through the cracks, and eventually win with the leftovers.
You saw Jim put the top card to the bottom. The top card was a Last Breath. Does not need that in this situation. His draw for the turn was a copy of Temple of Enlightenment. Now, as you mentioned, the turn that he wants to set up is Divination plus leave Dissolve up. And in theory, he could do that this turn if he does draw a land off of the Dissolve, but you don't really have to worry about that. You can just play the land and pass the turn back.
Yeah. Again, Jim taking no chances with anything significant slipping through the cracks.
Here's a Temple. Stiles going to leave that card on top. And his card in hand is a Dreadbore. That's the last card. And as you can take a look at Jim Davis's deck list, that card does not have very many targets. There are only 2 copies of Jace Architect of Thought, and then there are 2 copies of Elspeth. That's it. Divination going to draw Davis a couple of the cards. He's going to play his land for the turn. That's a Mutavault. Going to pass the turn back. The goal here is pretty simple. Play lands, build to revs, win eventually.
Yeah, and he's going to he's building to a rev for 5 next turn.
Let's see what card he kept on top. It's a Domri, and that's not going to resolve. There's a Planar Cleansing that Davis is looking at. Interestingly enough, he may leave that card on top of his deck, but it's kind of interesting because the way that Jim is playing the game, it just seems like, oh, well, he didn't draw a Detention Sphere. He's just had counterspells for my stuff.
Yeah, I think Jim wants to keep the Planar Cleansing, and he ultimately did there. It's just an incredible insurance policy, again, against Collin slipping something through the cracks.
Davis has not played his land yet. Looks like he may play a Plains here. Again, he's got a Sphinx's Revelation in his hand. Doesn't look like he has much reason to cast a Jason. He won't. He's just going to leave Rev up. Stiles going to draw a card here. It's a copy of Pulachronos, which we know Davis has multiple answers for, so doesn't care about that much at all. He can also set up a nice turn here of Rev for a bunch. On my turn, Verdict, play Jace. That's a beautiful turn as well. So Davis is going to add 5 cards and 5 life here. This has been a dominating performance.
A clinic.
Yeah.
And it all comes down to that Domri not resolving on turn 3 when it could have had Collin played his land before combat. If Domri's in play, this is a very different game, especially since Jim's list doesn't have any copies of Detention Sphere or Banishing Light. Domri's going to be in play for a while, but instead it is has been removed from the game, and Jim's been able to easily fend off everything else that's going on.
Punch mana going to get tapped here. You see he's going to slide the Mutavault over, but he realizes I need one more white mana to cast a Supreme Verdict. So a little 3-for-1 action there. Clear those up. Follow this up with a Jace, presumably. Makes you wonder how he wants to use the Jace. If he does cast one, he can cash in for cards or he can tick up. He has to imagine, I think, knowing that he's playing against Jund monsters, that, okay, chances are he has a Dreadbore in his hand. And so that's why he's going to take it down, because he wants to get the value from the card. So here's an Azorius Charm, there's a Last Breath, and there is a Azorius Guildgate.
And I think Jim's going to have to discard to hand size if he takes a 2-card pile. So I think he's going to take the 1-carder here in most situations.
And there's the Azorius Charm. Other cards are going to go to the bottom. Hollow Fountain comes into play. He's going to count how many cards in his hand. It's an exact 7, just like he drew it up.
That's got to be a really good feeling as the control player. You have all your mana tapped, and you look at your hand at the end of the turn. There's 7 cards. Yeah, I did this right.
Dreadbore takes care of Jace. Sylvan Carrington is the last card there for Stiles. So he's just playing at the top of his deck. And Jim Davis is doing anything but that. Ton of cards in his hand at the ready. Now he just needs to figure out the way to close out the game. Needs to find that copy of Aetherling or one of those 2 Elspeths and get this one over with.
I think that once Collin commits a creature of note to the board, Jim is going to Supreme Verdict and then start winning with Mutavaults.
I think the big thing here, there's Gorkland Rampage, right? We could argue that's the creature of note.
Yeah, that's good enough. He doesn't want to sweep away just as Sylvan Caryatid.
Here's a second Sphinx's Revelation. Oftentimes on the SCG live camera, people concede to that one.
Yeah.
I said 6 cards, I'm good. I'm good. I think the one thing here that's really important for Jim, because I think we can say that Jim has probably got this one locked up.
It looks pretty good for me.
Figure out how he wants to close it out. I think the big thing here is I don't think he wants to show the Planar Cleansing.
Absolutely not.
That's the big thing. Because that kind of gives things away a little bit about what Jim is up to. Is there is your Supreme Verdict to take care of the Rampager and the Caryatid.
And now does Jim have enough resources left over where he can start beating down with his Mutavaults?
You see him slide him forward. Looks like he's ready to go. Going to play a land, going to fire it up. Being able to leave Dissolve open too. Yeah, okay, buddy. Everything coming up, Jimmy D.
And look at that hand.
Now, I'm going to watch the discard here very carefully. You see the cleansing in the back. Yeah, not even. Will he discard that? I can't imagine he does.
I mean, he's moving the Dissolves and the Rev up, so I imagine this is...
And these are the ones that are going to go. Divinations, Azorius Charms, and a land.
Ugh.
Yeah, I don't need any of these. He's got plenty of cards in his hand. And this is the kind of clinic he's been putting on all day. Stiles just has to draw and pass the turn back. Davis will take a draw. It's a copy of Elspeth. That's the card he's looking for to close this baby out. And he's got protection to do it in the form of Dissolve. Sun's Champion comes into play. Up to 5 we go. 3 soldier tokens plus an attack with the Mutavault's going to knock Stiles down to 12. It's funny, you can just watch Jim play. You can tell he's been testing with this deck for some time.
Yeah. Well, it's so important with blue-white control to just be conscious of pace of play.
Yep.
Because you lose more to the clock than you're going to be losing to what your opponent's up to.
Dave's going to fire Mutavault. He's going to come in here for 5. Looks like we're going to attack with that Mutavault as well. And he's picking up his pace player now because even though we're working our way towards 40 minutes, the thought process here is I want to get this one over because, this is the easy one.
Right.
The next game's getting a little more hairy because my opponent's got sideboard cards that are high impact. So I got to be a little more careful, think my decisions through a little bit more. But game 1 right now, I'm pretty far ahead. Going to discard Revelation. Well, I don't need that.
A good sign for Collin.
Yeah, Jim says, I have a Dissolve. He kind of showed it to him really quickly there. And Stiles says, that's good enough for me. Picking up game number 1 is Jim Davis with blue-white control.
And this is where it gets really interesting here. Is Collin going to be bringing in a variety of anti-detention sphere cards that Jim does not have in his list?
Well, you see, he's going to reach, and I wouldn't be surprised to see those things at all. And you've got a sideboard in front of you. Those anti-detention sphere cards, they certainly exist.
It's very close to CVM sideboard. 2 Golgari Charms, 3 Nylea's Disciple, 2 Mistcar Hydra, 2 Rakdos Return, a Mizzing Orders, 2 Putrefy, a Primeval Bounty, a Vraska the Unseen, and an Ultimate Price. You're going to see the Planeswalkers, the Mistcover Hydras, the Rakdos Return, and I think potentially the Golgari Charms are going to be coming in here as well. Now, there still has the regeneration clause. Yep. It's not 100% dead. It can come up in weird scenarios involving Jim having Elspeth in play, but it's not going to be a very good tool here. And if Collin's leaning too heavily on these Abrupt Decays and Golgari Charms and draws too many of them, Jim might just walk through game 2 as well.
As far as Jim's sideboard is concerned, 2 Dispel, 2 Negate, a Gainsay, 2 Archangel of Thune, 2 Celestial Flare, a Reprisal, a Jace Memory Adept, a Deicide, a Last Breath, and 2 copies of Renounce the Guilds. I actually like Renounce in this matchup quite a bit because Dommer is such a problem, especially when you don't have Detention Sphere or Banishing Light.
And that's another big upside for playing the list without Detention Sphere. Back when we were playing, testing for the Block Constructed Pro Tour, Ben Lundquist, who wasn't working with us but was in the office with us and talked about decks, he really wanted to play Renounce the Guilds and not Detention Sphere. And in theory, you can play both of them together. You get some awkwardness or whatever, but it's not the end of the world to play them together. But Jim gets to just incorporate this card very easily. And fighting cards like Domri, Xenagos, other threats that these decks bring to the table, it's really an excellent removal spell that's really underplayed in Standard because the deck that can most easily incorporate this is a deck like Blue-White Control, but Detention Sphere makes it prohibitive.
You gotta like Reprisal as well, just because it can take care of Pelikranos and Gorkland Rampager. It's not the best because it can't take care of Stormbreath Dragon, but I still think it's good. And it is just a one of. The 2 copies of Celestial Flare are gonna certainly come in here. Don't think we're gonna see Archangel of Thune. Don't think we're gonna see Jace Memory Adept either. Then you've got those 2 Negates, those 2 Dispels, and a Gainsay. I could certainly see Negate coming in after sideboard. A lot of targets.
I think that Jim's plan in the matchup is to strand Collin with as many dead cards as possible and win arbitrarily. Even though it's likely Archangel is good to go, there's some chance Collin has some amount of creature removal in his list, and we know that he's going to have some dread boards regardless. So I think Jim's going to stay away from that most likely and just be a pure board control deck. He'll have his Aetherlings, his Planeswalkers, and he can win the game almost arbitrarily once he exhausts Collin of resources and gluts Collin with dead cards.
Looks like the players are finished sideboarding here. They're going to shuffle for game number 2, so we will take a look here. We will take a look here at Acorn Mystic. Now, we talked about this quite a bit. Reason being is because it's coming out next week. You know it's June 13th next week?
That's pretty crazy.
It's kind of frightening.
Happened fast.
Like, don't get me wrong. I've been having a blast all year long, traveling around with you and dealing with you. And you buy
Dealing with me?
Well, you buy me Bear Claws when I'm on a diet, so that would be dealing with you.
That's because what a friend is someone who enables the behavior you want to do but will not for some reason. That's what friendship is. Anyhow, these things are going to be sweet.
Yep.
They're available next week.
Yeah.
And I recommend checking it out. 2 copies you get anytime you enter a Legacy Open Series event. So that's pretty sweet.
We have different definitions of friendship. Playmat, deck, box, dice, bag, sleeves, all of that good stuff available starting next weekend, June 13th, at the Season 2 Invitational in Columbus. Hopefully you guys can come out to that because it's going to be a lot of fun. And if you've never been to Columbus, it is an awesome city. It is awesome. And it's not because it's in Ohio, which is already awesome. Columbus is better than Cleveland, where I grew up, because it's just, I mean, Ohio State's there. So as a result, you have a lot of things to do.
Yeah.
It's a really, really good city. And when we went to Columbus earlier this year, we got to see the Blue Jackets play some hockey, who Jim probably dislikes, given his Rangers jersey.
Jim actually mentioned to me that he was jealous that we were able to get tickets actually on the ice for $150 or whatever, and he's a Rangers fan, and you can't even park at Madison Square Garden for $150.
I imagine Rangers tickets are probably pretty expensive. Also, they're like, I don't follow the hockey playoffs or anything, but I think they're like doing well.
They're in the NHL. They're in the Stanley Cup Finals.
Are they in the finals playing
Yeah.
the Kings?
Yes.
Okay. Then they're doing really well.
When I was back home in New Jersey, I was in town. I could have theoretically gone to one of their playoff games against Montreal, and I believe the cheapest ticket on StubHub was $750 or something to sit in the nosebleeds. I mean, it's not.
What?
Yeah. It's Madison Square Garden, and New York loves hockey, so.
All right, fair enough. I mean, it's like, I obviously love basketball, as do you, and, I watch NFL and baseball sometimes, stuff like that. And I don't even, particularly dislike hockey. I just don't know how to watch hockey. But, when I was watching the game when we were at the Blue Jackets game, I was like, well, I mean, this is pretty sweet.
Yeah, I definitely don't understand the nuances of the sport or much of the strategy, but it is just really fun live. I've been to a couple live NHL games, and it's just a great environment, and yeah, it's super fun. But watching on TV is not for me.
I also appreciate that, what they're doing is incredibly difficult, too. I don't understand how it's difficult because I don't know how to ice skate and stuff like that. And there's a lot of strategy going on and, passing and communication. But, I mean, I understand that, there are people who just love hockey, and for what it's worth, everything that I know is that playoff hockey is the best time of the year.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
It is awesome.
So, Jim, a big Rangers fan, apparently a big fan of this Blue-White Control deck, up a game sitting at 6-0, taking a look at a Renounce the Guilds.
Renounce is great here. One of the ways for Blue-White Control to lose is just to an early Planeswalker out of Jund Monsters, and Renounce is a great insurance policy. There's some chance that it's dead, but if it's a dead card, I think Jim's going to be thrilled because it means that Collin doesn't have any of his planeswalkers.
He's got to be thrilled about this, too. Collin's off to a slow start. He's not accelerating anything too crazy.
Yeah.
Davis is going to be able to play Immutable and just pass the turn back here. Stiles is going to draw a card. We saw on turn 3 of last game a Syncopate take care of a Domri, and might not be a Syncopate this time. There's an Overgrown Tomb. But Renounce the Guilds will take care of Domri just the same. Stiles going to tap 3 mana. There is Domri. Says, does that resolve this time? Davis says, yeah, that's fine. Take a look at the top card. Miss, and kill it.
Oh, Renounce.
Yeah, yeah. That's an appropriate face, yeah. And that's probably not the first time that Jim has had that happen today.
Well, does Jim get to Divination and not discard the hand size now?
Well, he can't leave up Dissolve. I wonder if he has a Syncopate in his hand or a Negate or something like that, because he doesn't have blue mana for Dissolve. So this could be interesting, actually. I wonder if this was a cognizant decision.
Well, we'll find out momentarily. If he tries to cast the Dissolve, obviously that's.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Fair enough. And what I like about this is in response to him making a token.
Yeah.
Because the token's multicolored as well. So in response to you making a token, I am able to cast my Renounce to take care of the Xenagos. And sure, I'll take 2.
Renounce the Guild's putting on a real clinic right now.
Just how Jim drew it up. Now the question, of course, is it better to leave Renounce up that turn, or is it better Divination?
I think it's better to Renounce because, again, because Jim doesn't have Detention Sphere and Banishing Light in his list, he has to be conscious of Domri at all times. It's a really big cost for him to tap out.
Looks like Jim's going to Revelation on top of his deck. He is tapped out right now. The shields are down. Can Stiles take advantage? Mistcutter Hydra says yes, he can. Does he have a 5th land for a Stormbreath Dragon? Yes, he does. Stiles is going to go down to 14. And he's going to fire away here with the Dragon.
And I like Dragon here because you want to play your counterable threat when Jim is tapped out and then leave your uncounterable threat for the spot where Jim has mana available.
There's the verdict. Take care of those. Azorius Guildgate passes the turn back. Shields are down again here for Davis. Stiles will draw a card. Now, if you're Davis, you're just hoping to fade something like Rakdos' return. There's another Dragon. The pressure is on here. Davis is going to go down to 8. He's looking for a card now, like a Celestial Flare, like a Verdict, something to get that off the table.
Yeah, Stormbreath is especially bad here because, Collin is a mana away from being able to go Monstrosity with it too. So
Jim might be forced to just cast a Jace here. Maybe minus that and hope for the best.
What's he drawing to there? Just a Celestial Flare?
Yeah, just Flare mostly. It's not a great situation, that's for sure.
No.
Let's see if he can figure out how to work himself out of this situation. And let's not get it twisted. Even though game 1 was a landslide in Jim's favor, things get really difficult after sideboard.
Yeah. Well, it depends again how much does Collin draw of the anti-Detention Sphere Banishing Light cards that maybe he has 0 in his list. Maybe he has watched Jim or has deduced what's going on here. But if he draws a lot of those cards post board, that's a lot less pressure that he has access to, and Jim may be able to win those games fairly easily.
Davis goes reaching. 4 mana. This might be the Jace turn. And there it is. Jace Architect Thought. Again, only got 2 of in his deck. Going to turn over a couple of cards here. Divination, a Hallowed Fountain, and a Plains. Not really too interested in all of those. You know what would be really interesting? Seeing a 3-0 split.
The 3-0.
Yep. And see Jim maybe have to take a 0. Because he could die to a Stormbreath Monstrosity activation. But it would just be your typical 2-1 split. Davis going to play a Plains, pass the turn back, try to represent a copy of Celestial Flare right now. But because Stiles doesn't have the 7th land, I don't think, we could very easily just say, all right, I'll just cast Mistcutter for 5 and try to kill you.
Or you can also just cast Xenagos this turn again, wait for the turn where Jim just has Counterspell mana up and try to win that way.
Yeah. There's a Mistcutter. Davis takes a look at his hand. Can't counter it anyway. So there's a 5/5 with haste. In we go.
This play is slightly worse if Collin is playing around the possibility of Celestial Flare. He does have the upside of just killing Jim if he has nothing. Jim has nothing, and now we're going to game 3.
Jund Monsters ties it up against Player Control. Davis is going back to the sideboard very, very quickly. Wonder if he's reaching for anything in particular.
Well, what are the big things he can be doing here?
I couldn't Yeah, and I'm kind of watching him in the corner right now to see if he brings anything in or out. I think he's just consulting his deck right now. You know, he has cards out of his deck right now like Azorius Charm and stuff like that, things that just aren't really all that important. I feel like he has like, you know, a copy or two of that card in, but it's not very important in this matchup. Again, it's sideboard, 2 Dispel, 2 Negate, a Gainsay, 2 Archangel of Thune, 2 Celestial Flare, a Reprisal, a Jace Memory Adept, a Deicide, a Last Breath, and 2 copies of Renounce Skills. I don't think too much changes, and it doesn't look like he changed anything. So just checking and making sure.
To me, this matchup always feels about what kind of follow-up does the Jund Monsters player have when the blue-white control player taps out for Supreme Verdict. If there's some really awesome follow-up, the blue-white control player often just doesn't have the time and energy and resources to wade through everything. If you get Supreme Verdict and there's not much of a follow-up and the blue-white player gets on tap, that's all the game comes down to. And that game, Collin had a Storm Breath to follow up with, Mistcutter Hydra left over, more than enough resources to work with.
One thing I actually kind of overlooked about Reprisal, I was mentioning how it takes care of Gorkline, Rampager, and Pulachronos. Cards aren't all that big of a deal in the matchup. It can't take care of Stormbreath Dragon. It can take care of Mistcutter Hydra.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
So that actually matters quite a bit, I think.
I mean, Mistcutter Hydra is a card that I commonly see blue-white control lose to in positions where it has... There's a game that blue-white control loses where it either misses land drops or something weird happens. And all the other games it seems to win is kind of how it breaks down. And Mistcutter Hydra is one of the cards that can make something weird happen, where you actually have resources, you have ways to defend yourself, but they just don't line up the right way.
Well, things certainly lined up perfectly for Jim game 1.
Yeah.
Able to use all of his mana, never having to discard even though he revved multiple times. Things lined up beautifully for him. Then, they didn't line up so great in game number 2. Collin able to take that one down. We'll see how things line up for game number 3.
And with no mana accelerator, too. It was just, here's a threat, here's a threat, here's a threat. Eventually ran Jim out.
I still like his deck. Win or lose, I still like it. And I think that, again, this is just like kind of the first take. I think it's going to evolve more. I'm really interested to see how the evolution takes place. You know, a card I expected to see in this deck was a card like Fated Retribution. Maybe it's one of or something like that. Can catch people off guard, but it wasn't there. Maybe he wants more counter magic. You see the removal of like 2 Last Breath, and there's 1 Deicide. I love the 4 Divinations. The counter spells of 4 Dissolve and 2 Syncopates in the main deck. You know, maybe you shift those numbers around a little bit. Who knows? But I like a lot of what I see here. I just like the idea behind it, and the fact that someone's actually finally trying it.
The risk that if I was Jim, the one thing I'd be worried about is if you're planning on playing this in the Invitational next week, the cat's out of the bag.
Yep.
People against you are going to know that you're not on Detention Sphere and Banishing Light, and that's really going to influence the way they sideboard and play against you.
We're underway. Tempo of Enlightenment. Start things off here for Davis. Looking at a Plains. That's going to the bottom, so he's happy with how many lands he has in his hand. And it looks like he has quite a few, to be honest. Stiles going to play a Temple of Abandon. Take a look here. Now, Stiles, that's a Primeval Bounty.
Yeah, that's a singleton.
Nice. Azorius Guildgate looks to be the draw. Going to put that into play and just pass the turn back. So the shield is down right now, but there's nothing too bad that can happen on turn 2.
Scavenging Ooze or Sylvan Caryatid, neither of two things that Jim's that concerned about.
Elvish Mystic as well comes into play. Temple of Mana puts the top card to the bottom. Davis going to draw a card. It's a copy of Jace, Architect of Thought. Davis, Hallowed Fountain, going to put that into play tapped and just kick the turn back over to Stiles, who will take a draw. It's a forest. One thing you'll notice, you look at Stiles' mana right now, no black mana.
Although his black cards aren't even very good in this matchup right now, so not a huge cost.
There's a Domri. That's a negate. No, sir. And see, Jim has put a large emphasis on making sure that Domri stays off the table, which is a good place to be, I think.
It's the biggest concession he's made, in my opinion, in building the deck this way, is Domri is even more threatening against his build than it is against most builds of blue-white, and Domri's the best card against blue-white.
Davis does have the ability to cast a Jace this turn if he'd like. You see the Mutavault in his hand. He's got plenty of lands, actually. It looks like he's going to go with Mutavault as his land drop, and he will play Jace. The question is, do we take it up? Do we take it down? And it's going to be going down yet again. So here's an Elspeth Sun's Champion, a Plains, and a Mutavault. I think it's an easy split, and it's an easy take for Jim.
No hesitation.
Not at all. Again, his hand has a lot of lands, a Planar Cleansing, and now an Elspeth. And the interesting thing here is that Stiles could get kind of tricked here because he might be expecting, okay, 2 turns from now, I have to worry about an Elspeth. So I'll play the game in a certain way, and then he gets absolutely annihilated by Planar Cleansing. We could see that happen in just a second.
It's potentially a huge squeeze.
Here comes Stormbreath, taking care of Jace. Pass the turn back over to Davis, who's going to untap. And he's going to take a draw at 19 life. That is a copy of Sphinx's Revelation. Does a nice job of bridging the gap. The question now is, do you want to cast it on turn 5 for just 2 cards, or do you want to wait a little bit later? Pretty clear answer. He wants to wait. He wants to wait a little bit later.
I think that you're happy to wait there, and that was the big thing, you know, right there. Jim really needed Supreme Verdict. And if he has it there with Elspeth and a 6th land in hand, it's really hard for Collin to come back. But Collin's still in it now.
Now Collin drew a copy of Rakdos' Return, and he also has an Overgrown Tomb in his hand. So this has got to be a little bit scary if you're Davis.
And he might, in fact, just test spell here with Primeval Bounty.
Now there's a flare. Yeah, we could see the test spell be Primeval Bounty. That's a little bit interesting. Takes 2. He might just find this feels like a Rakdos Return to me. Yeah, and that's going to hit for all 4 cards. And that is a big hit because there goes the Rev, there goes the Elspeth, there goes everything for Davis. Jeez.
It's all his best cards.
Yeah. And now he's got to top deck his way out of this. Take a draw, Will Davis. It's just a land. It's a scry land. That's a good start. And that's a Revelation that I think he kept on top. All right.
That's the best start that Jim can have here.
Yeah. Now the question, does he want to fire in with a Mutavault or not? Try to get 2 points of damage or defend himself from 1. I think at this point, your life total actually matters more than your opponent's life total. So going from 15 to 14 doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but I think I'd rather stay at 15 instead of putting my opponent down to 16.
I think that I would have attacked there because what if Collin starts the turn by attack you with Elvish Mystic, there's almost no way Jim can block because he needs his mana to rev for enough to get back in the game.
Sure, sure.
And the 2 points of damage could matter.
Primeval Bounty in the house. Whenever you cast a creature spell, put a 3/3 beast into play. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put 3+1/+1 counters on target creature you control. Talking to you, Elvish Mystic. When you play a land, you gain 3 life. What Jim's going to do right now is he's going to draw 3 cards. The reason for that is because he has not found a land for this turn yet. So he might be able to find a land drop, might be able to find another Temple of Enlightenment and chain together another set of Revelations.
And that's what he needs to do to get back into this.
And there is a land. Divination and Jace are the other 2 cards in his hand. Now he's hoping he doesn't get hit by another Rakdos Return here. Now he's going to attack just for 1 from Stiles, so Davis is going to go down to 17. Again, Stiles does have a creature to play. It's a copy of Courser of Krufix. Trigger the bounty. 3/3 on the way. And now this is a situation where Planar Cleansing is completely absurd.
Yeah, this is the big payout right now.
Verdict would just be okay. You see Polakranos, the top card. Overgrown Tomb, going to gain 3 life. But this is where Planar Cleansing is awesome. Davis going to untap, take a draw here.
Even Aetherling's capable of still stealing this game. So Jim is not out of it by a stretch.
Let's see where Jim wants to start. Do you start with Divination or you start with Jace? Looks like the answer is you start with Jace. I think he's deciding where he wants to begin. Is there one place better or worse to start here?
I would probably spend with the thing that costs the most mana. Because it's possible that he Jaces into Jace plus X and then can Jace again, leaving Divination still left in his hand for next turn.
Now, we can't see those 3 cards great, but I can see one of them. And I've got that Sniper's Eye. One of them is a Planar Cleansing.
And that one's going by itself.
Yeah.
But there's a red.
Okay. Boy, that's a tough decision.
I don't know. I think you can take Planar Cleansing here. You still have the Divination left over to draw cards with, yeah. It's not like he needs that Revelation here. He gets to look at more cards with this Divination, so.
All right, 2 cards coming. 1, Azorius Charm. 2, Azorius Guildgate is not playing land yet this turn, so there's your Guildgate. There's your passing of the turn.
Now, the argument for doing things in the other order is that Jim would have been more informed about what pile he was supposed to take had he Divination first.
Sure.
Imagine you Divination into Planar Cleansing and then flip over those 3 cards, then you get to take Sphinx's Revelation.
Yep, that's true. Top card's a Blood Crypt here for Stiles. So now you see Stiles' board. Stiles gets to do some attacking here. He'll take care of Jace, with the Courser. You can deal some damage here, put Davis down to 13. Can't play Polakranos now because he knows that there's a Planar Cleansing, on the horizon. What did Jim draw this turn? Supreme Verdicts. Well, maybe you just cast that. Maybe you cast that instead of the Planar Cleansing at this point? Or are you more concerned about casting the 6 mana spell because 6 mana is much more than 4?
Yeah, I like just casting Planar Cleansing here, I think.
Now imagine there's no Planar Cleansings in this deck. We're looking at a completely different game. Planar Cleansing is going to turn this game around in a big way.
Yep.
And there that is. It's going to clean up everything. You can take that Primeval Bounty with you, too. That does not stay. Davis is going to play a Plains. He'll pass the turn back. There you do see Plantar Cleansing. M14 rare that a lot of people have been talking about. A lot of people wanting to play, but no one's pulled the trigger on it. Jim Davis has this weekend.
I remember how bad this game was looking just a few turns ago.
Yes.
Jim lost everything to the Rakdos return, and Collin had more gas left over. Now we're in a spot where it feels, if anything, like Jim's favored from here.
Jim is deciding if he wants to cycle Azorius Charm or hold it to time one that Pulachronos. I think that's a really interesting decision. He's got that Supreme Verdict. Do you cycle to maybe get a new card, maybe find a Rev? Or do you just wait?
I think you can afford to wait one shot because your draw step may inform what you want to do with the Azorius Charm. And Jim's kind of drawing the same conclusion.
Let's see what he finds. Just an island. Right now, his best draw is Sphinx of Revelation, but keep in mind, 2 in the graveyard, 1 on the bottom of the deck. Gonna play an island.
And no elixir in his list either.
Nope. I think right here is where he's hoping, all right, Collin, draw a land or a spell that doesn't matter, like that Golgari Charm, and come on into the red zone, maybe pump up the jam on that Pulachronos, perhaps. I think that's what he's hoping for. There's Azorius Charm, gonna put that on top.
Well, the Golgari Charm might end up mattering if Jim eventually has the Supreme Verdict with that Golgari.
It could matter down the road,
yeah.
For sure. Here's a Temple of Enlightenment, top card. Jim is stuck. Top card, Elspeth.
Not shabby.
Not too bad at all. Davis. Can certainly fire in with Mutavault now if he'd like. Looks like he will. Put you down at 27.
Give him a taste.
And he knows what's coming. It's Copy of Pulachronos. That's going to come directly into play. And that Blood Crypt should be untapped to start the turn. So we will mention that as he's paid 1 too many. He never actually officially untapped the Blood Crypt.
Right.
That's part of your turn, so I want to make sure that we do get that correct.
Not a huge deal regardless,
No, of course
but
not.
Just better to keep things accurate.
Yeah. Well, it'll be up to the table judge's discretion on that, but never did actually untap the land for the turn. So you can make the argument that he just was floating mana or whatever. So either way, things are kosher, good to go. I imagine that Jim leads with the verdict here.
Yeah. Because he's pretty happy to get this Golgari Charm out of here because now he gets to go Elspeth minus.
Kill your guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And hope for the best on the next turn.
Because he can't plus Elspeth because Collin can just fight the tokens and kill Elspeth.
Yep. So now you drop Elspeth down. You minus it, presumably.
Yeah.
To kill that thing. And now you just hope your opponent doesn't top deck on you for a turn and start working your way towards letting Elspeth take over the game. You see Jim, you see the look.
Yeah.
Please don't die. Oh, God. Storm Breath Dragon comes and takes down the Elspeth. Davis has got some work to do now. Let's see what the draw is. It looks like it's just a land, perhaps.
I guess it could have technically been worse. It could have been Mistcutter Hydra.
It can always be worse.
Well, not by much.
Actually, I think Jim might be looking at a flare. Huh. I think Jim is now deciding, all right, do I want to attack with Mutavault or no? The answer is no, because of a card like Mistcutter Hydra. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. Storm Breath Dragon #2. Davis is going to take a bunch. Takes 8, goes down to 5. Take a draw. A Mutavault and an island, and that is going to do it. Collin Stiles with some timely top decks defeats Jim Davis 2-1. The first blemish on the record for Plantar Cleansing Control.
And Jim did a great job of navigating the game to that space, but that is part of the upside of playing Jund Monsters. There's a lot of haymakers to draw from that spot. Storm Breath, of course, being the most notable one, and back-to-back Dragons able to get the job done.
7-0 for Jund Monsters. Davis 6-1 now with his blue-white control deck. Hopefully now we'll have a few minutes to sit down with him in the sideboard with Andrew Schrout. Maybe get a deck tech about this deck. And stuff lost to take, obviously, where, you're fighting your way, you're clawing back into the game. There's nothing that he did there that I really, disagree with. I think he played the game beautifully. Just a timely top deck, but that's magic, as they say.
It's one draw step, and in that spot, even Domri is probably not good enough to get back in the game.
Yep.
Has to be, I would imagine, Xenagos or a haste creature. And Xenagos effectively being a haste creature in that
Yeah.
spot. So Collin does have a fair number of draws there, and Rakdos return is really bad for Jim too. So it's not like those are the only draws in the deck are the Stormbreath Dragons, but still had to be pretty much that turn.
Yeah, and I mean, let's not forget too that Jim was able to claw his way back into that game after Rakdos returned Resolve, clearing out the hand.
Yeah.
You know, that was the pretty impressive part there. He was able to find a Revelation, work his way back into the game. But at the end of the day, a Stormbreath Dragon does what Stormbreath Dragon does. Ends the game.
Steals games against control decks.
Yeah, so